The notification sound from my security system cut through the silence of my home office like a knife through butter. 3 a.m., and someone was fumbling with the front door lock. Again. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I didn't need to check the cameras to know it was Clarissa stumbling home from another girls' night out that seemed to happen 4 times a week now. My wife of 15 years had developed quite the social calendar lately, especially for someone who used to complain that our suburban neighborhood was quieter than a library. "Adrian, you still awake?" Her voice carried that particular pitch that meant she'd had exactly 3 Cosmos too many. I could hear her heels clicking against the hardwood floor I'd installed myself last summer, back when I still thought we were building something together. I kept typing, fingers dancing across the keyboard as I patched a vulnerability in the Henderson Industries firewall. Cybersecurity consulting paid well, especially when you could work from home and avoid the office politics that made my skin crawl. But tonight, the irony wasn't lost on me that I was fixing other people's security breaches, while my own life was apparently wide open to attack. "Don't worry, he's clueless," Clarissa's voice drifted from the kitchen, followed by that giggle she used to reserve for my jokes. Clueless. I paused mid-keystroke. "Lady, I invented half the security protocols that keep this city's banks from getting robbed blind by teenagers with laptops. But sure, I'm clueless." The phone conversation continued in hushed tones punctuated by more of that giggling. I saved my work and crept to the hallway, staying in the shadows like some ridiculous spy in my own house. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see her leaning against the granite countertop we'd picked out together, phone pressed to her ear, designer purse spilled across the surface. "Tomorrow night, then? The gallery opening? Yes, I'll wear the red dress." A pause. No, he never pays attention to what I wear anymore. That stung, mainly because it was probably true. When had I stopped noticing? When had she stopped caring if I noticed? She ended the call and I slipped back to my office, but not before I saw her leave the phone on the counter. Clarissa never left her phone anywhere. That device was practically surgically attached to her hand. 20 minutes later, she appeared in my doorway, swaying slightly. "Working late again?" she asked, but there was no concern in her voice. Just that flat tone she'd been using with me for months. "Henderson's system got hit by ransomware. They need it clean by morning." I gestured at my screens. "Someone's got to pay for your shopping habit." She rolled her eyes. "My shopping habit pays for itself, thank you very much. The design firm is doing better than ever." "Right. All those late meetings with clients." "Exactly." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, I might be out late tomorrow, too. Gallery opening with Tina." Tina Lawson, her best friend since college, the HR executive with the shark smile and the habit of looking at me like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe. I'd never liked Tina, but Clarissa insisted she was just protective. "Have fun," I said, turning back to my screens. But I wasn't looking at code anymore. I was thinking about that phone on the kitchen counter, and about how Clarissa's clueless husband happened to know 17 different ways to crack a password. The next morning brought coffee that tasted like betrayal and a newspaper I couldn't focus on. Clarissa had left early for a breakfast meeting, which was new. In 15 years of marriage, she'd never been a breakfast meeting person. She was barely a breakfast person. I was debugging a particularly nasty piece of malware when I heard her car pull into the driveway. Through my office window, I watched her climb out of her BMW, phone already pressed to her ear. She was laughing at something, that genuine laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months. She came through the front door still talking, and I heard her say, I know, but we have to be careful. Just a little longer." Careful about what? I minimized my work windows and pulled up the security camera feeds. Our house was wired better than most government buildings, a perk of my profession and my natural paranoia. Every angle covered, every conversation potentially recorded if I chose to activate that feature. Which I just did. Clarissa walked into the kitchen, and I watched her retrieve her phone from where she'd left it the night before. She scrolled through messages, typing responses with the kind of smile that used to be reserved for my good news. Then she opened her calendar app, and I watched her create a new entry. Engagement dinner, Gavin and Clarissa, Saturday 8 p.m., Chez Laurent. Engagement dinner. My wife was planning an engagement dinner, and unless I developed multiple personality disorder, I wasn't Gavin. I sat there staring at the screen for a full minute, watching my wife of 15 years plan her engagement to another man in our kitchen, using our Wi-Fi, probably with money from our joint account. The rational part of my brain, the part that solved complex security problems for a living, started cataloging facts. The late nights, the new clothes, the sudden interest in girls' nights and client meetings, the phone calls, the way she'd stopped touching me, stopped asking about my day, stopped being present in our marriage. The emotional part of my brain just kept screaming one word: Gavin. I'd heard that name before. Gavin Blackwell. He owned some trendy art gallery downtown, the kind of place where people paid thousands of dollars for paintings that looked like accidents. Clarissa had mentioned him a few times, always in passing, always as part of a group. Tina and I went to Gavin's opening. Gavin thinks the art market is really hot right now. Gavin says I have excellent taste, Gavin says. When had my wife started caring what some pretentious art dealer thought about anything? I pulled up his gallery's website. There he was, smiling out from the About page, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about real problems. Mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, wearing a jacket that probably cost more than most people's rent. The bio described him as an entrepreneur and patron of emerging artists, who brings a fresh perspective to the contemporary art scene. Fresh perspective. Right. I'd bet he brought a fresh perspective to a lot of things. My phone buzzed with a text from Clarissa. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Working late. At 10 in the morning, she was already planning to work late. Either her design firm had suddenly become the busiest place in the city, or my wife was a worse liar than I'd given her credit for. I screenshot her calendar entry, then started digging deeper. If Clarissa thought she was being careful, she was about to learn what careful actually looked like. I'd spent 20 years learning how to find secrets people thought they'd buried. Corporate espionage, identity theft, fraud investigation. I'd seen every trick in the book. But I'd never used those skills on someone I loved. The irony was bitter. I'd spent our entire marriage protecting our privacy, our security, our life together. State-of-the-art alarm system, encrypted networks, firewalls that could stop a military-grade cyber attack. I'd made our home into a fortress, and I'd locked myself inside it with a traitor. By noon, I'd compiled enough evidence to ruin 3 lives and possibly start a small war. Clarissa's phone had automatically backed up to our shared cloud storage, something she'd forgotten when she changed her password, but not her backup settings. Amateur mistake. I'd taught her better than that. The text messages painted a picture that made my stomach turn. Months of planning, secret meetings, intimate photos I definitely hadn't taken, and threading through it all, Tina Lawson's number, offering advice, encouragement, and what looked like detailed logistics support. He's working late again, Clarissa had texted just last week. Perfect cover. You deserve so much better, came Tina's reply. Gavin appreciates you properly. Appreciates her properly. I'd been appreciating her properly for 15 years. I'd put her through design school when her parents cut her off. I'd supported her business when it was just a dream and a credit card. I'd listened to her complaints about difficult clients and celebrated every success. But apparently, I didn't appreciate her properly. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how long it had been going on. 6 months of lies, 6 months of working late and girls' nights and client dinners. 6 months of me coming home with flowers or planning surprise weekends, thinking I was married to someone who was already planning her next life. I was reading through a particularly detailed exchange about hotel room preferences when my doorbell rang. The security camera showed Mrs. Valdez from next door, holding a casserole dish and wearing the expression of someone with gossip to share. "Adrian, dear," she said when I opened the door. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right? I couldn't help but notice Clarissa leaving very early this morning, and she seemed upset." Mrs. Valdez was 73 years old and had the observational skills of a trained intelligence officer. Nothing happened on our street without her knowledge and commentary. "Everything's fine, Mrs. V. Just busy with work." She studied my face with the intensity of someone reading a particularly interesting book. "Well, if you need anything, I made too much tuna casserole again." I accepted the dish because refusing would only fuel more speculation, and Mrs. Valdez's speculation had a way of becoming neighborhood fact. "You know," she said, not moving from my doorstep, "I've seen that red sports car in your driveway a few times lately, when you weren't home." "Red sports car?" "Convertible, very flashy. The driver always seemed to know exactly when to arrive." Of course he did, because my loving wife had been feeding him my schedule. After Mrs. Valdez left, I pulled up the exterior camera logs and scrolled backward through the past month. There it was, a red Porsche convertible, license plate, Art Guy 1. Subtle as a brick through a window. The car appeared on days when I'd been at client sites, staying just long enough to make the visits look casual but not long enough to suggest anything inappropriate. Except now, I knew exactly how inappropriate things had gotten. I was contemplating various forms of revenge when my phone rang. Eli Masters, my oldest friend, and the only person who'd ever successfully knocked me on my ass in a fair fight. Crash had earned his nickname during our college years when he'd crashed through 3 different computer security systems in a single night just to prove it could be done. These days, he ran a boxing gym and taught cybersecurity part-time, but he still had the reflexes of a cat and the moral flexibility of a career criminal. "Adrian, my man, you sound like death warmed over." "Just tired. Working too much." "Right, working. That's why you haven't returned my last 4 calls." A pause. "Talk to me, brother. What's eating you?" Eli had always been able to read me better than I read code. We'd been friends since freshman year, when he'd caught me hacking the campus network and offered to teach me how to do it without getting caught. "Clarissa's cheating on me." The words came out flat and emotionless, like I was reporting a system error. "Ah, hell. You sure?" "I'm sure." "Evidence?" "Enough to convict her in 12 states and 3 federal districts." "Damn." Eli was quiet for a moment. "You want to talk about it? Or you want to hit something?" "Both." "Jim, 1 hour, and Adrian, bring a change of clothes. You're going to sweat out some demons." The boxing gym occupied the bottom floor of an old warehouse in the part of town where gentrification hadn't quite reached yet. It smelled like sweat and leather, and the kind of honest work that left you too tired to lie to yourself. Eli took one look at my face and pointed toward the heavy bag. 20 minutes. Work out the rage, then we talk." I'd been boxing with Eli for years, but I'd never hit anything with the fury I brought to that bag. Every punch was a text message I'd read. Every combination was a lie I'd believed. Every round was another month of my life I'd wasted on someone who was already gone. When I finally stopped, my hands were raw despite the gloves, and Eli was watching me with the expression of someone who'd just seen a car accident. "Feel better?" "No." "Good. Means you're not crazy." He tossed me a towel. "Now tell me everything." I laid it out for him. The phone calls, the calendar entry, the text messages, the red Porsche in my driveway. Eli listened without interrupting, his face getting darker with each detail. 6 months, he said finally. 6 months of planning this behind your back. With help from Tina. That shark? I never liked her. Eli cracked his knuckles. So what's the plan? I don't have a plan. I have evidence and rage and no idea what to do with either. Wrong answer. Eli stood up and started pacing. You've got skills, brother. You've got resources. And you've got every right to be furious. The question is, what kind of justice are we talking about here? Legal justice. Boring but smart. He grinned. Lucky for you, I know exactly how to make legal justice very, very satisfying. We spent the next hour planning. Eli had a devious mind when properly motivated, and my situation had definitely motivated him. By the time we finished, I had a strategy that would be completely legal, thoroughly documented, and absolutely devastating. One question, Eli said as we prepared to leave. You sure you want to do this? Once you start down this road, there's no going back. Your marriage is over either way, but this is going to hurt everyone involved. I thought about Clarissa's laugh on the phone, about months of lies, about Art Guyan parked in my driveway while I was working to pay for the house he was violating. They made their choice 6 months ago, I said. I'm just making mine now. That evening, I sat in my office and watched the security cameras as Clarissa got ready for her late work meeting. She spent an hour on her appearance, wearing a dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. She kissed my cheek on her way out, a gesture so casual and false it made my skin crawl. Don't wait up, she said, same as always. Wouldn't dream of it, I replied. But I would be waiting. Just not the way she thought. I gave Clarissa a 30-minute head start, then activated every surveillance protocol I'd ever developed. If she thought she was being careful, she was about to discover what careful actually looked like when deployed by someone who understood the concept. The GPS tracker I'd quietly installed in her car showed her heading downtown toward the gallery district. Not toward her office, not toward any client meeting, but straight to Gavin Blackwell's domain. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She's not just cheating with Gavin, she's playing you for a bigger score. A friend. A friend. Right. In my experience, anonymous tips came from people with their own agendas, but the message was intriguing enough to investigate. I spent the next 2 hours diving deep into Gavin Blackwell's business dealings, and what I found made me reassess everything. His gallery was a front for money laundering. His art investments were elaborate tax evasion schemes. His client list read like a who's who of people trying to hide assets from ex-spouses and federal investigators. And now my wife was engaged to him. The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. Clarissa's sudden interest in updating our financial portfolio, her questions about my client contracts and income streams, her suggestion that we diversify our investments through art purchases. She wasn't just leaving me for another man. She was positioning herself to take everything I'd built and disappear into Gavin's network of financial shadows. My phone rang. Eli. Please tell me you're not sitting in that office plotting something stupid. Define stupid. Anything that ends with you in jail or on the evening news. Then no, I'm not plotting anything stupid. I paused. I'm plotting something brilliant. That's what I was afraid of. What did you find? I told him about the money laundering, the tax schemes, the elaborate con game that my marriage had apparently become. Eli whistled low. Brother, you're not just dealing with cheating. You're dealing with organized fraud. This is federal crime territory. I know, which gives me options. Or it gets you hurt. These aren't amateur hour players. He was right, of course. But I was past caring about personal safety. They'd made this personal when they decided to use my marriage as cover for their criminal enterprise. I need you to do something for me, I said. Remember that contact you have at the FBI? The one who helped us with that corporate espionage case? Adrian, no. Adrian, yes. This is bigger than just my marriage. They're stealing from people, hiding assets, probably destroying lives. Someone needs to stop them. And that someone is you? That someone is us, if you're willing. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, what do you need? Agent Sarah Mitchell met us at a coffee shop that looked like it catered to people who took their caffeine very seriously. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing, and the handshake of someone who could break your wrist if she felt like it. Eli says you have information about financial crimes, she said without preamble. I slid a flash drive across the table. Gavin Blackwell's been running money laundering operations through his art gallery for at least 3 years. Everything's on there. Bank records, client communications, transaction histories. She plugged the drive into her laptop and scrolled through the files, her expression growing more interested by the minute. How did you obtain this information? Legally, Blackwell's been using my wife to gather intelligence on potential targets. She gave him access to our shared networks, thinking she was helping him research art investments. He used that access to hack my client databases. It was mostly true. The fact that I'd hacked him back and gathered evidence through methods that might not hold up in court was a detail Agent Mitchell didn't need right now. Your wife is involved in this? My wife is a victim, I said, surprised by how easily the lie came. She thought she was helping a legitimate businessman. When I discovered what was really happening, I gathered evidence to protect her. Agent Mitchell studied my face like she was reading a contract. And you're willing to testify to all of this? Absolutely. She closed the laptop and pocketed the flash drive. Mr. Tate, if this information is accurate, you may have just handed us the biggest art fraud case of the decade. We'll need to move quickly before they realize their security has been compromised. How quickly? 48 hours, maybe less. Perfect. That gave me just enough time to implement the rest of my plan. That night, Clarissa came home at 2 a.m., reeking of expensive cologne and looking thoroughly satisfied with herself. She slipped into bed beside me, probably thinking I was asleep. Good evening? I asked quietly. She startled. I thought you were sleeping. Just dozing. How was the client meeting? Fine. Productive. She turned away from me. We landed a big contract. Congratulations. Anyone I know? I don't think so. Private collector. Very exclusive. More lies, delivered with the casual ease of someone who'd had plenty of practice. I wondered how many times she'd lied to me over the years. How many client meetings and girls' nights had been cover for something else entirely. That's wonderful, honey. I'm proud of you. She made a non-committal sound and pretended to fall asleep, but I could feel the tension in her body, the guilt she was trying to suppress. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe, and planned her destruction with the methodical precision I usually reserved for debugging complex security systems. The next morning brought coffee and the newspaper and Clarissa's announcement that she'd be working late again tonight. Big presentation tomorrow, she explained, not meeting my eyes. Of course, I'll probably work late too. The Henderson account is heating up again. She nodded absently, already reaching for her phone. I watched her scroll through messages, typing responses with the kind of focus that suggested urgent communications. After she left, I activated the tracking protocols and settled in to watch my wife's final performance as Mrs. Adrian Tate. The GPS showed her heading not toward her office, but toward an upscale shopping district. Camera feeds from traffic lights and security systems, legally accessible through my consulting contracts, showed her meeting Tina Lawson at a boutique that specialized in wedding dresses. Wedding dresses. They weren't even waiting for the divorce to be final. I screenshot everything, adding it to the growing file that would soon become evidence in multiple legal proceedings. Then I made a phone call to Detective Sherry Malone, a contact I'd developed through years of cybersecurity consulting for the police department. Adrian, what can I do for you? I need to report suspicious activity at my residence, possible breaking and entering, theft of personal property. When did this happen? It's been ongoing for months. I just discovered the extent of it. I'll send a unit over this afternoon. Can you be available around 3? I'll make time. The police visit was exactly what I'd hoped for: official, documented, and completely legitimate. Detective Malone took statements, photographed evidence, and filed reports that would create an official record of everything I'd discovered. Your wife has been accessing your business files without permission? She asked, reviewing her notes. Using my credentials to gather information for a third party. I believe it's connected to a larger fraud investigation. You'll need to change all your passwords and security protocols. Already done. I've also installed additional surveillance to prevent further unauthorized access. She nodded approvingly. Smart. A lot of people don't think about digital security in domestic situations. If only she knew. That evening, I sat in my office and watched the security feeds as Clarissa prepared for what she didn't know would be her final deception. She'd chosen a red dress, the same one she'd mentioned in that phone call I'd overheard. She looked beautiful, radiant even, like a woman in love preparing for an important evening. She was. Just not with her husband. She kissed my cheek again on her way out, that same casual gesture that had become a mockery of intimacy. Don't wait up, she said. Actually, I replied, I think I will tonight. She paused in the doorway, something in my tone making her look back. Everything okay? Everything's perfect, sweetheart. Have fun at your engagement dinner. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. What? Chez Laurent, 8 p.m. You and Gavin. Congratulations, by the way. I hope he likes my leftovers. For a moment, she just stood there, mouth open, looking like someone who'd just realized they'd walked into a trap. Adrian, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You've gotten very good at explaining things that aren't true. I turned back to my computer. But save it for the lawyers. They're going to want to hear all your explanations. She started to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. I pulled up the exterior cameras and watched her sit in her car for 5 minutes, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing frantically. Probably calling Gavin or Tina or both. Then she drove away and I began the final phase of my plan. The call came at midnight, just as I was putting the finishing touches on my masterpiece of legal revenge. Clarissa's number, but when I answered, it was Gavin's voice on the line. We need to talk. No, we don't. Look, this doesn't have to get ugly. Clarissa and we're in love, real love. You can't fight that. I almost laughed. Real love. Is that what you call fraud and money laundering? Silence. Then, I don't know what you think you know. I know everything, Gavin. Your little art scam, the money laundering, the tax evasion. I know about the fake provenance documents and the shell companies. I know about the clients you've been helping hide assets from their spouses and the IRS. More silence. The FBI knows too, by the way. They're very interested in your business model. You son of a jerk. Probably. But I'm a son of a jerk with evidence and federal contacts and absolutely nothing left to lose. I paused. How's that engagement dinner going, by the way? The line went silent. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. The security cameras showed Clarissa and Gavin on my front porch, both looking like they'd aged 5 years in the past few hours. I opened the door, but left the security chain engaged. Adrian, please, Clarissa began. We need to talk about this rationally. Rationally? You want to talk rationally about 6 months of lies and fraud and planning to steal everything I've worked for? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I looked at Gavin, who was trying to project confidence but mostly looked like a man who'd just realized he was in way over his head. Nice car, by the way. Art Guy one. Very subtle. Let us in, Gavin demanded. This is ridiculous. Actually, this is my house, which you've been visiting without my permission while I was at work. That's called breaking and entering. Clarissa invited me. Clarissa doesn't own this house. I do. Check the deed. That was true. When we'd bought the house, I'd insisted on keeping it in my name alone, a decision that had seemed paranoid at the time, but now looked like genius-level foresight. "You can't just lock us out," Clarissa said. "I live here." "Not anymore. I changed the locks this afternoon. Your belongings are being packed and stored. You'll receive information about pickup arrangements through your attorney." "My attorney?" "You'll need one. Both of you will." I closed the door and watched through the cameras as they stood on my porch, arguing in increasingly frantic whispers. Finally, they got back in Gavin's ridiculous red car and drove away. But they'd be back. People like Gavin didn't give up easily, especially when they were facing federal charges. The next morning brought a phone call from Agent Mitchell. "We moved on Blackwell last night. Arrested him at his gallery along with 3 associates. We also executed search warrants on his residence and storage facilities." "What about the money laundering evidence?" "Solid. Your information was incredibly detailed and accurate. We're looking at multiple federal charges, possibly RICO violations, if we can prove organized criminal enterprise." "And my wife?" "That's more complicated. She's clearly involved, but the extent of her knowledge and participation isn't clear yet. She's hired an attorney and isn't talking." Of course she wasn't. Clarissa was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. "What happens now?" "We build the case. Grand jury, indictments, trials, could take months or years to fully resolve." "I understand. Thank you for keeping me informed." "Mr. Tate, off the record, I'm sorry about your marriage. This can't be easy." "No, it's not. But it's necessary." After I hung up, I sat in my office and contemplated the wreckage of my life. 15 years of marriage, gone. A home that felt more like a crime scene than a sanctuary. Friends who would inevitably choose sides. A future that looked nothing like the one I'd planned. But also, justice, accountability. The satisfaction of knowing that people who'd tried to destroy me were facing consequences for their actions. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the news about Gavin's arrest. Thought you should know Tina's been bragging about taking you down for months. She's the one who planned everything." A friend. I stared at the message, pieces of the puzzle rearranging themselves in my mind. Tina Lawson, Clarissa's best friend and biggest supporter. Tina, who'd never liked me, who'd always made snide comments about my profession and my personality. Tina, who'd been giving advice and encouragement throughout Clarissa's affair. I pulled up Tina's employment records, easily accessible through public databases and professional networks. She'd worked for Henderson Industries 5 years ago, before I'd been hired to overhaul their cybersecurity. She'd been fired for attempting to access confidential employee records. I'd been the one who'd discovered her unauthorized access. I'd been the one who'd recommended her termination. Tina hadn't been helping Clarissa find love. She'd been orchestrating an elaborate revenge scheme, using my wife as a weapon against me. The realization should have made me angry, but instead I felt something like admiration. It was a brilliant plan, really. Turn my wife against me, use her access to gather information, connect her with a criminal who could help them both disappear with my assets. If I hadn't discovered it by accident, it might have worked. But I had discovered it. And now Tina was about to learn what revenge looked like when deployed by someone who actually understood the concept. I spent the rest of the day gathering evidence of Tina's involvement, her communications with Clarissa and Gavin, her research into my business and personal finances, her connections to other people who'd been victims of similar schemes. By evening, I had enough evidence to destroy her career and possibly send her to prison alongside her co-conspirators. But that felt too easy, too clean. I wanted her to know exactly who had beaten her, and how, and why. The community center had been decorated for the annual neighborhood block party with the kind of enthusiasm that only suburban social committees could muster. String lights, folding tables groaning under potluck dishes, and a DJ who apparently thought everyone wanted to hear hits from the 80s. It was perfect. I'd spent the week making sure everyone who mattered would be there. Neighbors, former friends, business associates, even some of Clarissa's colleagues from the design firm. The kind of crowd that would ensure maximum social impact for what I was about to do. Clarissa arrived fashionably late, wearing sunglasses despite the evening hour and staying close to the edges of the crowd. She'd been released on bail pending trial, but the stress was showing. She looked thinner, more fragile, like someone who'd been living on anxiety and bad decisions. Tina appeared a few minutes later, scanning the crowd with predatory intensity. She'd dressed for battle in a power suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, projecting the kind of confidence that came from never having faced real consequences for anything. They found each other near the dessert table, heads bent together in urgent conversation. I watched from across the pavilion, noting how Tina's body language screamed control and manipulation, while Clarissa's radiated desperation. Eli appeared at my elbow, carrying 2 beers and wearing the expression of someone who was looking forward to a show. "You sure about this, brother?" "Never been more sure of anything in my life." "And you're certain it's all legal?" "Completely legal. Morally questionable, perhaps, but entirely within the bounds of law." "Good enough for me." He handed me a beer. "Let's watch some justice happen." I'd timed everything perfectly. The DJ was taking a break, the crowd was at its largest, and most people had had just enough alcohol to ensure they'd remember everything clearly, but talk about it freely. I walked to the makeshift stage and tapped the microphone. "Excuse me, everyone. Could I have your attention for a moment?" The crowd quieted, turning toward me with the polite interest that suburban social events demanded. "I wanted to thank you all for being such wonderful neighbors over the years. Your support has meant everything to Clarissa and me, especially during these difficult times." I could see Clarissa across the crowd, her face pale with dawning horror as she realized what was about to happen. As many of you know, Clarissa and I are getting divorced. These things happen, and we're both committed to handling it with dignity and respect. Murmurs of sympathy from the crowd. Mrs. Valdez nodded approvingly. However, I recently discovered that our marriage didn't end because we grew apart, or because we wanted different things, or because of any of the usual reasons marriages fail. The crowd was paying closer attention now, sensing drama in the air. Our marriage ended because my wife spent 6 months planning an elaborate fraud scheme with her lover and her best friend. A scheme designed to steal my assets, destroy my business, and leave me financially and professionally ruined. The murmurs got louder. Clarissa was pushing through the crowd toward the exit, but Eli had positioned himself to block her path. Gavin Blackwell, the man my wife was planning to marry, was arrested by the FBI last week on charges of money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. The evidence suggests he's been running these schemes for years, targeting successful professionals and destroying their lives for profit. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the DJ's sound system. But the most interesting part of this story is how it all began. You see, this wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. This was revenge, planned and executed by someone who's been sitting in this crowd tonight, listening to me speak, probably thinking she was going to get away with it. I looked directly at Tina, who had gone very still. "Tina Lawson, would you like to tell everyone why you spent months manipulating my wife into destroying our marriage? Or should I?" The crowd turned to look at Tina, who was standing frozen near the dessert table like a deer caught in headlights. 5 years ago, Tina was fired from Henderson Industries for attempting to access confidential employee records. I was the cybersecurity consultant who discovered her unauthorized access and recommended her termination. I activated the audio file on my phone. Tina's voice filled the pavilion, crystal clear through the sound system. "He destroyed my career, Clarissa. One recommendation from the great Adrian Tate, and suddenly I'm unemployable in my field. He needs to pay for that." Another voice, Clarissa's, responded, "But how?" "We take everything. His money, his reputation, his business, his marriage. We leave him with nothing." The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. "That was recorded 3 months ago," I said, during one of their planning sessions. "There are hours of similar recordings, all of which have been turned over to federal investigators." Tina finally found her voice. "You can't just record people without their consent. Actually, I can. This is a one-party consent state, and since the recordings were made in my house, using my equipment, they're completely legal." I activated another file. This time, it was Gavin's voice. "The beauty of this approach is that Adrian will never see it coming. He trusts Clarissa completely. By the time he realizes what's happening, we'll have transferred everything to offshore accounts and disappeared." The crowd was getting restless now, angry murmurs rippling through the pavilion. These were decent people, hard-working neighbors who believed in marriage and honesty and treating people fairly. What they were hearing violated every principle they held dear. "But here's the thing about revenge," I continued, looking directly at Tina. "It only works if you're better at it than your target. And Tina, you're not." I pulled up another file on my phone, this one a video. The projection screen behind me lit up with security camera footage of Tina entering my house, going through my office, photographing documents. Breaking and entering, identity theft, corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit fraud. The FBI has enough evidence to put you away for 20 years. Tina was backing toward the exit now, but the crowd had shifted to block her path. They weren't being aggressive, just present. A wall of suburban disapproval that was somehow more intimidating than any physical barrier. "Adrian, stop this," Clarissa called out. "This isn't you. This isn't who you are." "You're right," I said. "This isn't who I was. But you changed that when you decided to destroy everything we built together. You turned me into someone who fights back." I looked out at the crowd, seeing neighbors I'd known for years, people who'd attended our barbecues and holiday parties, who'd watched our marriage from the outside and thought they knew us. I want everyone here to understand something. I'm not the victim in this story. I'm the guy who refused to be a victim. When someone tries to destroy your life, you have two choices. You can let them win, or you can fight back with everything you've got. I disconnected my phone from the sound system and stepped down from the stage. "The party's over," I announced, "but the justice is just beginning." The crowd began to disperse, but slowly, people stopping to shake my hand or offer words of support. Mrs. Valdez hugged me with surprising strength. "I always knew something wasn't right," she whispered. "I'm proud of you for fighting back." Tina had finally made it to the parking lot, but she turned back to shout at me across the crowd. "This isn't over, Adrian. You think you've won, but this isn't over." "Yes, it is," I called back. "You just don't know it yet." She got into her car and drove away, tires squealing on the asphalt. Clarissa approached me as the crowd thinned, her face streaked with tears. "I never wanted it to go this far," she said. "I never wanted to hurt you like this." "But you did hurt me like this. You chose to hurt me like this every day for 6 months. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Adrian. Sorry doesn't give me back 15 years of marriage. Sorry doesn't undo the lies or the betrayal or the humiliation." She nodded, accepting the truth of it. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you face the consequences of your choices. All of you." She walked away without another word, and I watched her go with something that might have been sadness if I'd had any capacity left for that emotion. Eli appeared beside me, surveying the aftermath. "Feel better?" "I feel complete." "Good. Because you just declared war on some very dangerous people, and they're going to come back swinging. Let them come. I've got nothing left to lose and everything to gain." We stood there in the empty pavilion, surrounded by the debris of the block party and the wreckage of my old life. "So what's next?" Eli asked. "Next, I build something new, something better, something that can't be destroyed by people who mistake kindness for weakness." I looked around at the community center, at the neighborhood beyond, at the life I'd thought I wanted, and the future I was going to create instead. They wanted to turn me into a villain, I said. Fine, but I'm going to be the kind of villain who only destroys people who deserve it. 3 weeks later, the trials began. Gavin Blackwell was convicted on 14 federal charges and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Tina Lawson received 12 years for her role in the conspiracy. Clarissa, who cooperated with prosecutors and testified against her co-conspirators, received 5 years probation and community service. I sold the house and moved across town to a smaller place with better security and no memories. I expanded my consulting business, specializing in cases involving domestic cybercrime and corporate espionage. Word got around about what had happened, and suddenly I had more clients than I could handle. People who wanted someone who understood both the technical and personal aspects of betrayal. Mrs. Valdez sent me a Christmas card that first year with a note. I always knew you were stronger than you looked. I'm proud of you for proving it. I kept that card on my desk next to a photo of myself and Eli at the boxing gym, both of us grinning like we'd just won the lottery. Because in a way, we had. We'd won the right to define justice on our own terms, to fight back against people who thought they could destroy us without consequences. They'd wanted to make me a victim. Instead, they'd created something much more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose and all the skills necessary to ensure that justice, delayed though it might be, would never be denied.